Greetings, fellow cosmic voyagers, it's your host, X here. Today we're diving deep into a subject where astrophysics, human history, and colossal misjudgments collide. We often gaze at the stars and ponder the immense energies at play in the universe. Supernovae, quasars, the very nuclear fusion that powers our sun. But what happens when humanity tries to tap into these fundamental forces, especially under the shadow of global conflict and tyrannical rule? We're talking about the quest for the atomic bomb during World War II, a weapon that promised to unleash a power akin to a small star here on Earth. The stage was set for a terrifying race, a contest of intellect, resources, and political will. On one side, the Allied powers, driven by fear and the pursuit of a decisive end to the war. On the other, Nazi Germany, a regime built on an ideology of supremacy, yet paradoxically one that would make critical errors in its pursuit of ultimate power. It's a story filled with brilliant minds, fatal flaws, and the kind of high-stakes drama that reshapes the world. While Nazi Germany had some of the brightest minds in physics, including Werner Heisenberg, yes, the real one, not the Breaking Bad guy, Hitler's nuclear bomb project failed miserably, and here's why. This wasn't just a simple case of they tried, they failed. Oh no, the reasons are far more complex, interwoven with the very fabric of scientific understanding, political ideology, resource management, and even a bit of daring espionage. We're going to dissect the German Uhrenverein, or Uranium Club, and explore the fascinating and frankly chilling story of why the swastika was never emblazoned on a mushroom cloud. So, buckle up, because we're about to explore the critical missteps that prevented one of history's most notorious regimes from wielding the atom. It's a journey into the heart of physics, ambition, and failure. So let's start with the science itself, the very bedrock of any attempt to split the atom for destructive purposes. To build a nuclear bomb, you need a chain reaction. Imagine a single neutron striking a uranium nucleus, causing it to split and release more neutrons. These new neutrons then go on to strike other nuclei and so on, in an exponentially growing cascade of energy. But here's the catch. For this chain reaction to become self-sustaining and explosive, you need a certain amount of fissile material packed together. This is what we call critical mass. Get this wrong, and your bomb is nothing more than an expensive radioactive paperweight. It's a precise business, a delicate dance with the fundamental forces of nature. Now, the German team, led by the brilliant Werner Heisenberg, a Nobel laureate and a founder of quantum mechanics, made a significant error right here. They miscalculated this all-important critical mass. Their estimates for the amount of uranium-235 or plutonium needed were substantially overestimated. Think about it. If you believe you need tons of an incredibly rare and difficult to produce material, the entire project suddenly seems astronomically more difficult, perhaps even impossible, within the time frame of a brutal, all-consuming war. This wasn't just a minor arithmetic slip. It fundamentally skewed their perception of the bomb's feasibility. It's like planning a trip to Mars, but thinking you need enough fuel to reach Alpha Centauri. This overestimation had profound consequences. It led them down research paths that were less efficient, and it contributed to a general lack of urgency within the program's leadership. If the bomb seemed like a far-off dream, requiring Herculean efforts for even a slim chance of success, why pour immense resources into it when more immediate weapons were demanded by the Führer? This fundamental misunderstanding of the physics, or perhaps a misinterpretation of their experimental results, set the German project on a wobbly trajectory from which it never truly recovered. The universe has its rules, and misinterpreting them can have world-altering consequences. Now, even if the science had been perfectly understood, there was another colossal hurdle. Adolf Hitler's own strategic vision, or perhaps his strategic myopia. Hitler was a man obsessed with immediate results, with weapons that could deliver swift, decisive victories, the essence of his blitzkrieg philosophy. He craved Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons, but his definition of wonder was often tied to how quickly they could be deployed on the battlefield to turn the tide of conventional warfare. He was a tactician of the moment, not necessarily a grand strategist envisioning the long-term implications of truly revolutionary technologies like nuclear arms. Think about the weapons that did receive significant German investment and development. The V-2 rocket, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, and the Messerschmitt Me-262, the first operational jet-powered fighter aircraft. These were groundbreaking, to be sure, and terrifying for the Allies, but they were extensions of existing military paradigms, faster planes, longer-range artillery. A nuclear weapon, on the other hand, represented a complete paradigm shift, a leap into an entirely new realm of warfare. For Hitler and many in his high command, the atomic bomb project, with its uncertain timelines and immense resource requirements, especially given their miscalculations, was seen as too slow, too much of a long-term gamble. This mindset directly translated into how resources were allocated. The German war machine was already stretched thin, fighting on multiple fronts. When faced with choices between funding an uncertain nuclear project that might take years to bear fruit, versus mass-producing more tanks, planes, or developing those V2s that could rain terror on London relatively quickly, the decision often skewed towards the latter. The uranium project received comparatively meager funding and a lower priority status than what would have been necessary for a serious, committed effort. It's a classic case of chasing short-term tactical advantages while missing the opportunity to seize a truly strategic, world-altering power. The universe offers up its secrets, but you have to be willing to invest in understanding and harnessing them. Chapter 3: The Brain Drain. When ideology eclipses intellect. One of the most tragically self-inflicted wounds to the Nazi nuclear ambitions was the catastrophic loss of intellectual capital, a direct consequence of their abhorrent racial ideology. You see, early 20th century Germany and Austria were absolute powerhouses in physics and mathematics. Many of the leading figures who were unraveling the secrets of the atom were Jewish. When the Nazis rose to power, their anti-Semitic policies led to the dismissal, persecution, and forced emigration of a staggering number of these brilliant minds. We're talking about a scientific exodus of monumental proportions. Consider the names: Albert Einstein, whose Eclipses is the very soul of nuclear energy; Leo Szilard, who first conceived of the nuclear chain reaction; Lisa Meitner, who, with Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, discovered nuclear fission but was forced to flee; Niels Bohr, a Danish physicist, though not German. His institute in Copenhagen was a hub, and he later fled Nazi occupation and warned the Allies. Hans Bethe, Felix Bloch, Eugene Wigner, the list goes on. These weren't just cogs in a machine, they were the architects of the nuclear age. And where did many of them go? To Britain, and crucially to the United States, where their genius would become instrumental in the Allied atomic bomb effort. The irony is almost too bitter to contemplate. The very regime that sought to dominate the world through supposed racial purity and scientific prowess actively drove away the intellect that could have given them an unparalleled advantage. It's a stark reminder that ideology, when unmoored from reason and humanity, can be incredibly self-destructive. The German nuclear program was left with capable scientists, yes, like Heisenberg and Hahn, but the collaborative environment, the sheer density of genius, had been irrevocably damaged. They had, in essence, intellectually disarmed themselves in one of the most critical scientific races in history. The universe doesn't care about your politics when it comes to its fundamental laws. It responds to understanding and ingenuity, regardless of origin. Chapter 4: Starving the Atom, the Material Deficit. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts, or rather the ores and isotopes. Building an atomic bomb or even a functioning nuclear reactor isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's an immense industrial undertaking. You need vast quantities of specific, often rare materials in the infrastructure to process them. Think about it, you need uranium ore, and not just any uranium, but the fissile isotope uranium-235, which constitutes less than 1% of natural uranium. Separating it is an incredibly complex and energy-intensive process. Or you need plutonium, which is bred in nuclear reactors from uranium-238, requiring a functioning reactor in the first place. Germany, by the time its nuclear program was even semi-seriously underway, was already feeling the immense strain of a prolonged multi-front war. Their industrial capacity was increasingly dedicated to producing conventional armaments, and Allied bombing campaigns were beginning to take a significant toll on factories, transportation networks, and resource stockpiles. They faced critical shortages of high-quality uranium ore. While they had access to some from Czechoslovakia, it wasn't nearly enough, nor was there capacity to refine it on the scale required. Then there was the issue of a moderator for their reactor experiments. They famously focused on heavy water, which is difficult and slow to produce, partly due to Heisenberg's belief that graphite, used successfully by the Allies, wouldn't work due to impurities in the German supply. This lack of industrial might and critical resources created an insurmountable bottleneck. You can have brilliant theories, but if you can't get your hands on enough enriched uranium or plutonium, or enough heavy water to sustain a chain reaction in your experimental reactor, your project is dead in the water, or in this case, dead in the subcritical pile. The Manhattan Project, by contrast, threw colossal industrial power at these problems. Germany simply didn't have the spare capacity. the secure resources or the undisturbed industrial zones to undertake such a Herculean task while fighting for its very survival. The physical universe demands its tribute in materials and energy, and Germany's coffers were running empty. Title: Cosmic Espionage. The Allies strike back. It's crucial to remember that the German nuclear program didn't operate in a vacuum. The Allies were acutely aware of the terrifying possibility of a Nazi atomic bomb. The prospect of Hitler wielding such a weapon spurred intense intelligence gathering and, when deemed necessary, direct action. This wasn't just a race of scientists in labs. It was a shadow war fought by spies, commandos, and strategists who understood that preventing German success was as vital as achieving their own. The universe of war has many dimensions, including the clandestine. One of the most famous and impactful acts of sabotage was directed against Germany's supply of heavy water, which, as we discussed, was the moderator material favored by Heisenberg's team for their experimental reactors. The Norsk hydro plant at Vemork in Nazi-occupied Norway was the world's primary producer of heavy water. In a series of daring operations, most notably Operation Gunnerside in February 1943, Norwegian commandos, trained and supported by the British Special Operations Executive, successfully infiltrated the heavily guarded plant and destroyed its heavy water production cells. Later, a ferry transporting a significant shipment of heavy water to Germany was also sunk. These actions dealt a devastating blow to the German reactor program. While they attempted to rebuild and find alternatives, the loss of time and material was significant. Beyond this specific celebrated sabotage, Allied intelligence actively monitored German scientific progress, identified key personnel and facilities, and undoubtedly factored this information into their strategic bombing campaigns. While not every factory hit was solely for its tenuous link to the nuclear program, the general disruption of German industry and research capabilities certainly played a role. The Allies weren't just waiting to see what would happen, they were actively working to ensure the worst-case scenario, a Nazi bomb, never materialized. It was a cosmic chess game, and the Allies made some critical captures. Outro title: The Atomic Verdict. Why the cosmos favored a different outcome. So, as German efforts faltered due to scientific missteps, skewed priorities, a self-inflicted brain drain, resource starvation, and Allied sabotage, a very different story was unfolding across the Atlantic. Meanwhile, in America, the US launched the Manhattan Project, recruiting over 130,000 people and spending nearly $2 billion. That's about $25 billion in today's money. It was an undertaking of almost unimaginable scale. A focused, relentless pursuit driven by the brightest scientific minds, many of whom had fled European fascism. It had top scientists, endless money, and the full backing of American industrial might. Germany had none of that in comparable measure for its own project. The contrast is stark. While the German Uranverein was a relatively small, somewhat disjointed and under-resourced effort, the Manhattan Project was a behemoth. It built entire secret cities like Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford, dedicated to the singular goal of producing an atomic weapon before the Nazis could. They pursued multiple avenues simultaneously: uranium enrichment and plutonium production, to maximize their chances of success. There was a clear vision, unified leadership under General Leslie Groves, and scientific direction by J. Robert Oppenheimer, and an almost terrifying sense of urgency. The universe, it seems, responds to concerted, well-resourced effort when trying to unlock its deepest secrets for such potent applications. The final thought. Hitler didn't lose the nuclear race because Germany was stupid. Far from it. The initial intellectual spark was there. He lost because he chased short-term glory, drove away genius through hateful ideology, and fundamentally underestimated the sheer scale and scientific commitment required to harness atomic power. His regime fostered an environment where long-term, deep scientific exploration took a backseat to immediate, often brutal military expediency. Meanwhile, the US bet big, embraced the complexity, mobilized its resources on an unprecedented scale, and moved fast. And in doing so, they won the race to the world's most powerful and arguably most terrifying weapon, forever changing the course of history and humanity's relationship with the cosmos itself. Keep looking up and keep questioning.